We discuss risers and fallers from the Baltimore Ravens Week 1 preseason win over the Tennessee Titans and more coming up next here on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire. We are, of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're free and available on all platforms. That includes on YouTube. And we're back after the Ravens 23-10 Week 1 preseason win over the Tennessee Titans. We broke that all down on Friday's show, the game coming on Thursday night. And look, there were a lot of positives overall. The Ravens extending their preseason winning streak to 21 games. And look, one of the big takeaways from that is that the Ravens don't need their starters or their stars to do that. They have depth to where they can stay competitive in these preseason games without needing a Lamar Jackson or a Mark Andrews to play a half or whatever. They have enough talent on their team from the first man on that roster to the 90th man on that roster. They actually have to get to 85 players. Is pretty soon here, so we'll be talking about that as the week progresses. The Ravens do make a couple moves over the weekend. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about the risers and fallers from that game, who I personally think maybe rose up on the depth chart, maybe fell down the depth chart a little bit, kind of in the same breath as winners and losers or studs and dusts. But today we're going to do risers and fallers. So in the first segment, we'll talk about the offensive risers and fallers. In the second segment, we'll flip that field, talk about defense. Then in the final segment, we'll dive into a bit of Joe Flacco conversation because, wow, Joe Flacco conversation on Ravens Twitter right now, at least, is buzzing. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But mainly we'll talk about the two practices over the weekend on both Saturday and Sunday, practice notes from that, who stood out, who didn't, etc. So, again, so much to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. And how fitting was it on Friday, the 3-year anniversary of me hosting this show, that I had tech issues uploading the show? Like it's so fitting that it happened. So I apologize to the 6 a.m. squad that there were little technical difficulties there. Hopefully there will be none of that today. But thank you so much for tuning in, whether you are in audio and video form. In audio, we're available wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening, whenever you're listening. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to follow along there and follow us anywhere you get your podcasts. Also, in video form, we are on YouTube, of course, the YouTube channel where we're growing really strong here, a great community. Be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Like this video. We put out daily Ravens content 5 days per week in both audio and video. So if you want those daily Ravens news, updates, analysis, anything relating to this team, we do preseason previews, preseason reviews, etc. We have guests on every week. So we're doing a lot of good stuff over here. Be sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at KaosStriker34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. I really do appreciate all the support. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. But let's talk now Ravens football, risers and fallers on the offensive side of the ball from week 1 of the preseason. And we'll start with quarterback. And I guess we can put Tyler Huntley in this conversation. I don't think is rising up the depth chart to be the number 1 quarterback. That's not what's happening. But I think he is improving his stock to the point where, look, if the Ravens wanted to trade him, they probably could right now. I personally am still not there yet. I still think he's too valuable of a player in this offense for a backup option of Lamar Jackson. But hey, look, if a guy like Anthony Brown continues to perform, that's a guy who we'll talk about. He is the definite riser in my book, a stock-up guy for sure. I didn't really know what to expect heading into this game for Anthony Brown, undrafted quarterback out of Oregon, and he performed really, really well. Ended up completing 10 of 15 passes for 117 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt there. And I think what the Ravens are looking at is the perfect third quarterback option for what they need on the team. Now, I am still pretty confident that they're not going to keep 3 quarterbacks. Again, that doesn't mean they are or they aren't. That's just where I am right now, and my opinion could change there. But yeah, I don't see them being able to keep 3 quarterbacks on this roster because of how much other depth they have. So with Anthony Brown, the question becomes, well, if he continues to play really well, which I hope he does, is he going to make it through waivers? You know, the better he plays, the less likely he makes it through waivers in that situation, maybe sneak him onto the practice squad. So you may be looking at a Brett Hundley there, who also, I mean, he finished the game 2 of 2. So all the Ravens quarterbacks, in my opinion, definite risers, not necessarily jumping up on the depth chart or anything, because Lamar Jackson is clearly that number one guy. But I was encouraged by what I saw from those guys. Good accuracy on their throws for the most part. We did see one or two maybe overthrows from Tyler Huntley. We saw a couple from Anthony Brown that weren't as accurate as you would maybe want. But hey, you know what? Overall, I was very encouraged with everything. You saw the deep connections, you saw the intermediate connections as well. I was impressed. Running the football, I think my number one riser is Justice Hill. For me, it is no secret how poor of an offseason I think Justice Hill had last year. He was not standing out in training camp, according to all accounts. His preseason was not great. And then he got injured and missed the entire season. So just a bad year for Justice Hill overall. And I thought that, hey, look, this is the fifth running back right now on the roster. The Ravens are probably keeping four guys. And you can maybe even argue six if you're talking about Corey Clement before the preseason started. I think he surpassed Corey Clement. I think he is in the clear driver's seat for the number 5 spot. Now, I don't think Baltimore keeps 5 running backs, but he impressed me in that game on Thursday night. He was good in pass protection, multiple good pass protection reps where he picked up free blitzers. That was a great job by him. He looked like he had his burst back, though. Part of the thing that made him so intriguing coming out of Oklahoma State is just how much burst he had overall. And I think that if he can get back to that, if Gus Edwards has to start the year on the PUP list, he's not able to play and whatever it may be, he has to miss some time. If the Ravens do decide to keep 4 running backs, then my picks right now would be J.K. Dobbins, assuming he's off the PUP, doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to go back on. J.K. Dobbins, you have Mike Davis, Tyler Beatty, and then I think Justice Hill would be my number 4 guy. So big credit to Justice Hill. I think he did really well. I don't want to name Tyler Beatty as a faller. He didn't have an inspiring day on the ground. He did have a couple nice plays, one where he caught a ball and did a lot of good things in the open field. That one for 9 in terms of receiving, but he did average 3.2 yards. He got the most carries on the team. He got 6 carries, 19 yards. Now, some of that was not his fault. Like, there was some miscommunication on the offensive line. We saw like one carry of his where one of the sides of the offensive line like didn't start when the play started. Like, they just kind of stood there. So I'm not saying Tyler Beatty's a faller, but I definitely would like to see more from, not even just from a stats perspective. It just seemed like he was getting bottled up on a lot of his runs. So I definitely want to see more from him. Still very encouraged by Tyler Beatty, still very high on him overall, but I think that for him, a good second preseason game, that'd be awesome to see, in my opinion. Wide receiver wise, I mean, we all know who the rises are. I think Shamar Bridges rose, to me at least, to the number 5 spot on that wide receiver battle, or in that battle for the Ravens. He had a very impressive game. He ended up catching 4 balls for 62 yards, leading the team in yards, had that touchdown. It's that big-bodied frame we've been talking about for so long with the Ravens. Who's going to be that big-bodied player that doesn't just have a big body, right? It's one thing to have a big body. It's one thing to be 6'4". It's another thing to play like 6'4". It's to go up, understand your height advantage, your body advantage, and whatever, and go up there, high point the football, come down with contested catches against leaving defensive backs. Shamar Bridges did that twice. He did it twice on Thursday night, and that is something that I was very encouraged with, because it's a player that knows how to play in his body. He's not someone who's scared to go up with his body. He went up there. He caught those footballs. Had some nice toe taps, ran some really good routes overall. When he didn't gain the separation, he was able to get the ball because he was catching the balls with DBs draped over him. So I was very impressed with Shamar Bridges. I also think Mekhi Polk, definitely a riser in my book, led the team in targets with 8, had 6 catches for 43 yards. So, I mean, look, only 7.2 yards per reception, but he did have a 23-yard connection with Anthony Brown, which was really, really nice. And I thought showed a lot of toughness, and he's a guy who also rose a little bit in my book. And then you have Jalen Moore, who I'm not going to call a riser or a faller. If you wanted to, I guess you could call him a slight faller because he only had 2 catches for 15 yards. But again, I don't think that was necessarily, he's all of a sudden like off the team or something. I still think he has an opportunity. He just didn't get the looks in the preseason game against the Titans. Tight end wise, we know where this is going. Isaiah Likely, big riser. He's a guy who a lot of people were intrigued. What is Isaiah Likely going to do? What is he going to do? What is he going to do? Well, what did he do? He had 4 receptions, 44 yards, didn't have a touchdown. And, 4 for 44 doesn't necessarily pop off of the page or anything, but he was giving the Titans the business on the field with the juke moves he had. And also he had that one high point contested catch, which was just incredible. So he's going to be a player I'm very high on. I picked him up in my dynasty league actually after making a trade. So I gave him the dynasty stamp of endorsement. He's going to be good in this league. We've seen so much from him. The blocking, that's a part of his game you could definitely call a falling part of his game from the Tennessee game on Thursday. But I think with time that will improve. Something I made a point on 105.7 on Saturday with Bruce Cunningham was the fact that, look, when Mark Andrews came out of college, he was not regarded as a very good blocker. And I think that he had to really work on that part of his game, improve that part of his game. And now we look at Mark Andrews. Blocking is not a liability with Mark Andrews. He's actually gotten pretty good at it. So for Isaiah Likely, look, it was his first preseason game. There's stuff for him to learn. Definitely was not a great game from him blocking wise, but I still call him a riser because of what he did as a pass catcher. I think, again, the positives definitely outweigh the negatives with Isaiah Likely. And then offensive line wise, I mean, there were a lot of risers. Daniel Falele, someone who I think performed very well. Jawan James, Ben Cleveland, Tyree Phillips, all players who were risers, in my opinion, played well, and I think showed potential. From where Daniel Falele was when he came to Baltimore, right at the start after being drafted, there was a lot of work to do. A very raw player. He's taken leaps and bounds, and there's a lot of film to back that up based off of what we have seen, based off some of the film that we saw from him in Minnesota. There's a lot of different stuff. His pass sets that look different. It is very encouraging from him. The left guard competition, I think, again, you saw good reps from Tyree Phillips. You saw good reps from Ben Cleveland at right guard, for example. That was encouraging. Then Jawan James playing out there as well. It was good to see him back on the field. So the Ravens offense, that 23-10 win, they had a lot of risers. Some guys who maybe fell a little bit, but I was very encouraged overall and excited to see what they could do next week against the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. We'll head into our first break here, though, on Locked On Ravens. Still a ton to dive into. When we get back, we'll be talking about the defense, those risers and fallers. So be sure to stay tuned. We still have a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BetterHelp. And life can throw you all sorts of curveballs all the time. And in those situations, it can be very, very important to have somebody to talk to. I know I've had people that have helped me through things when life has thrown me curveballs. And for BetterHelp, it's not a crisis line. It's not even self-help. It's professional therapy done securely online, available to people worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. You can schedule weekly video or even phone sessions. So you don't have to be on camera if you don't want to. And getting therapy every week is as easy as a few clicks on your laptop or phone away. And it's more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and financial aid is also available. You can visit their website and read their testimonials that are posted daily. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they're recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. And they have a special offer here today for listeners. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher, your host, still hanging out with you here on this Monday as we dive into the Ravens' 23-10 win over the Tennessee Titans, breaking it down a little bit further today. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe here on YouTube, like this video. Be sure to follow us in audio form and turn those notifications on as well. But let's now dive in to defensive risers and fallers for the Ravens on Thursday night. And I think when you start off on the defensive line, because we'll start there, Travis Jones, 100% Travis Jones is a riser. We saw 4 clips put out. I can't remember. I think Mike Renner put them out on Twitter. It was 4 clips. I reshared them, so credit to him for those clips. And just incredible work by Travis Jones. And those 4 clips, all different things Travis Jones is showcasing, just, holding the center, then ripping off when the ball carrier gets to him and just kind of controlling the center at the line, which was great, kind of picking when he was going to get off and get the ball carrier. You saw pass rushing prowess, him pushing the pocket in a pass situation. It's all different things that I think people are so excited about. And the reason so many people are so excited for Travis Jones to be in a Baltimore Ravens uniform right now. He's someone who, again, I have no idea how he fell to the 3rd round. I still, to this day, I could not tell you, but I'll take it. The Ravens will take it. A lot of other people will take it, so we'll just leave it at that. But Travis Jones is someone who definitely was a riser, and someone who I've said on the show before might not have the biggest role coming out maybe like in the first month or so, but I think by the end of the year, we'll have a massive one. If he keeps playing like he did in the preseason on Thursday, that big role might be coming a little sooner than I anticipate. So Travis Jones, a definite riser in my book. Outside linebacker wise, I didn't really see anything of note overall. I mean, there were a couple things that I could potentially talk about. I mean, maybe a small faller, as I talked about on Friday for after the game on Thursday, Jeremiah Moon. someone who I don't think did like anything terribly, but did have that penalty, the roughing the passer penalty, and the camera panned over to John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh is not a happy camper, and we know John Harbaugh is not a happy camper when those penalties happen. So I don't know. I don't think Jeremiah Moon did anything poorly in a case, but I do think that the penalty definitely did not help his case overall. Inside linebacker wise, I'm gonna call Malik Harrison a riser. I think there has been kind of a mixed bag on Malik Harrison, but I think the positives from Malik Harrison outweighed the negatives. Now there were positives, there were negatives. We saw Harrison really just fly around, be all over the field on Thursday night. But part of that was also the fact that he missed a couple tackles. He got stiff-armed on a play, so that was not great. But he did force a fumble, was able to lay some hits down a couple times as well, and just was flying. It felt like he was playing with a lot more confidence, which was really great to see, because I've said before, this is a huge, huge year for Malik Harrison, especially when you're looking at the inside linebacker group with a lot of improving guys still. Patrick Queen has a lot to prove heading into year 3, right? He's a player that has kind of been up and down a little bit. I have a lot of confidence in him, but he's going to have to prove that, right? Same thing with Malik Harrison. He hasn't really made a huge impact over the course of his first 2 years. What is he going to do in year 3? Josh Bynes, does he still have it? I think he does. I think he has a year left, or along those lines. So I think he has enough, but there's still, does Josh Bynes have it? Is this inside linebacker room enough? That's a question people have been asking. I think someone who might be a slate faller, also Christian Welch, I didn't see a ton out of him, and someone who was maybe vying for that 4th inside linebacker job alongside guys like Jacoby McLean and Josh Ross, who had a tip up on a Geno Stone interception, who we'll get to Geno Stone in a few minutes here. But those are the types of plays that, can make or break, especially when you're looking at preseason. I personally tend to value the game action a little more than training camp. Now, both are important, right? Both go into a decision. That's why, going back to Shamar Bridges, some people might have Jalen Moore still in that number 5 spot based off training camp. I have Shamar Bridges there based off the game. And obviously, training camp does go into that. Shamar Bridges has had a good training camp by all accounts. It's not like this is the first time Shamar Bridges has, flashed for the Ravens. It's happened in training camp. So I think for me, the game action is very important. So I'm looking forward to seeing what those guys can do in the second game of the preseason there. And then I also think corner-wise, we'll get to corners now, Daryl Worley, someone who definitely was a faller last year, that Week 15 game against Cincinnati where, to put it nicely, the Ravens got torched by Joe Burrow and company. That was not a fun game where the Ravens got torched late in that season. I think for him to have the game that he did, he had an interception, had 4 tackles, was tied for the team lead there, had a pass deflection as well. Good for Daryl Worley. Was signed earlier that week and was able to come in and make an impact. So good for him overall. Other than that, though, I guess a faller is definitely Kevon Seymour. He was one of the bigger ones. That one play on that huge gain from Tennessee just didn't look like he had any idea where he was going. I don't know. And he is very liked, I feel like, in that locker room. It just feels to me like that's the case. So if he doesn't make this team, I personally don't think he's going to. But if he doesn't make the team, I would not be shocked to see him back on the practice squad, because I think he is I think he's a practice squad corner right now. The ability to hopefully improve a little bit more. So we'll see what ends up happening. Side note, Chris Westry got cut by the Panthers, I believe it was yesterday. So maybe there's a reunion in store. I don't know. But so for me, definitely a faller is Kevon Seymour. I think Pepe Williams a little bit of a riser too. There were some people saying he was a faller. I don't know. I think personally he's a riser. Very early on established his presence in that game. Should have had a pick 6. He couldn't get his hands on it completely. He bounced off, but he swooped in for that pass breakup. So as he continues to get acclimated, I'm excited to see what he can do as well. And then safety position, Geno Stone, most definitely a riser. Had the interception. Someone who I did leave off of my initial 53-man roster prediction back a couple months ago. I had Darius Washington, but I think Geno Stone is a lock at this point, an almost clear lock for me. Probably like 95%, I'd say. I think he is too good of a player to let go at this point. If he is let go, there is no way. There's absolutely no way he is going to be available to go on the practice squad. Some team's going to swoop him up and claim him off of waivers. He's a player that he's, again, liked in the locker room. I think that's an also important factor. Can play special teams as well, I think. And I think the Ravens in their safety room, they are 5 deep there if you count Geno Stone, with Chuck Clark and Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams and Tony Jefferson, who also played pretty well on Thursday night in his snaps. And you look at Geno Stone, those are 5 players that you feel confident putting on the field. Some more than others, obviously, but I think that they are very, very good there overall. So good on Geno Stone for having the game that he did. I think inside linebacker, let's go back a little bit. We'll touch on a couple other guys. Josh Ross, definite stock up guy for me. Isaiah Mack, 4 tackles, stock up. Someone I forgot, actually. I don't know how I forgot him. Stephen Means, outside linebacker, stock up for sure. Was able to display some of that pass rushing presence that the Ravens, I mean, look, they are very thin at that position right now, all things considered, depending on the health of Tyus Bowser and David Ajabo, and obviously Vince Beagle tearing his Achilles. Stephen Means, I think, is going to be very important to this team if he continues to play the way that he did in this preseason game. He had a sack. He had a couple of the pressures that we saw and good plays. So I think that he is a guy to really keep an eye on over these next couple of preseason games throughout the rest of training camp, because he is somebody who did perform very, very well overall. And then, yeah, other than that, the Ravens, I mean, we can do a we can do a stock up, stock down, rises and fallers for the special teams unit. Jordan Stout, definite riser. Now, there's nowhere else for him to go. Like, he's the punter. He's the only punter. But he has a leg on him. He has a leg on him. And I know people saw the Bills punter go out there and boom that 82-yard punt, net of 62 because it was a touchback. But that's the thing, right? Jordan Stout has a very powerful leg. And I think that kind of gets lost because the punt god over there in Buffalo, as people call him, booming leg, can punt that football, as we saw, just miles and miles flip the field. Jordan Stout can do the same thing, but Jordan Stout has the ball placement, kind of the accuracy on those punts. He can hold, he can kick off. He's a very jack of all trades player, which is why a lot of other teams had Jordan Stout as the number one punter. Some had the Bills punter, but I do think for Jordan Stout, I'm very content with the Ravens with taking him as their punter. Now, again, there is still the question of, was a punter in the 4th round worth it, this, that, and the other? But the Ravens felt that way, and I think Jordan Stout a definite riser from Thursday night's action. Well, into our final break here, though, on the show. Coming up, we'll be diving into a bit of Joe Flacco conversation. We'll be talking about the Ravens' 2 practices on Saturday and Sunday from training camp. So be sure to stay tuned. Still a ton to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, though, I do want to tell you a bit about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting news. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the number one online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live game betting scores and podcasts, they have you covered. As BetOnline today, use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here. Our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher is still here with you again. Thank you so much for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. Be sure to follow us in audio form. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Make your second listen of the day Locked On NFL. I hosted the Monday show over there. I talk with Tony Wiggins of Locked On Jaguars, John Butchko of Locked On Jets, and Eric Crocker of Locked On 49ers. About everything happening in the league. We talk Zach Wilson, Joe Flacco, Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, a ton of conversation over there. But let's talk a bit about Joe Flacco here today, right? Wow. The amount of Joe Flacco conversation that has been going on in 2022 for the Ravens, not something I thought would happen, but here we are. Zach Wilson suffering, very luckily for the Jets, not a torn ACL, and I'm very happy it was not a serious injury for him, just a bone bruise and a meniscus tear that he has to get cleaned up a little bit, was flying out to Los Angeles to have that surgery. Now, what this means for the Ravens, you're probably, some people are probably wondering, why are you talking about the Jets right now? Well, the Jets play the Ravens in week 1. The initial timeline for Zach Wilson is 2 to 4 weeks, and the Ravens play the Jets in week 1. So there is a bit of iffiness in terms of Zach Wilson's status for that game, and if Zach Wilson is not able to play in that game, the one, the only Mr. Elite himself in Joe Flacco will be suiting up and starting against his former team. Flacco talked a bit about it to the Jets media on Sunday and said he has thought about it a tiny bit, referenced Steve Smith's revenge game against Carolina back when Steve Smith joined the Ravens. What seems like all those years ago, it really wasn't that long ago. But again, Flacco is not the player he was when he led the Ravens to the Super Bowl. But we all know about maybe January Joe comes out in September, because he said something along the lines of, he's going to downplay it, not make it a huge deal, but he knows that it will probably be a decently big deal, but he's going to try to make it not a big deal. So there has been all this debate about, well, who you're rooting for? You rooting for the Ravens or you rooting for Joe Flacco? Look, I love Joe Flacco, right? He is as elite as they come, but for that week, he's not elite, right? This is a Ravens podcast. We're talking about the Ravens over here. We're not talking about Joe Flacco. So, look, I hope Joe Flacco has a great year for the Jets, if he starts in any game except the Ravens game, right? That's the game where I'm like, ooh, all right, let Marlon Humphrey go do your thing, right? Marcus Peters, go out there, do your thing. But then, hey, week 2 on, go do your thing, Joe Flacco. Go out there and torch those teams. So, look, I love Joe Flacco. But for me, this is a Ravens podcast. We're talking about the Ravens over here over Joe Flacco. It's Ravens 1, Joe Flacco 2. We'll leave it at that for now. So any other team Joe Flacco plays, right? Pittsburgh, Cleveland, any of that, hey, Joe Flacco, go torch him for 500 yards. But for that Ravens week, it's Ravens defense over Joe Flacco for me, definitely. And some people differ from that. Some people say, hey, I want Joe Flacco to have a great game, but I want the Ravens to win. And look, to each their own. I think for the Ravens, that week 1 game against the Jets, maybe it'll have a little more oomph to them when everything goes down there. But let's talk about practice on Saturday and Sunday, The Ravens were able to get back on the field, get back to work. And on Saturday, Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman had connections. They were able to connect on a bunch of different plays. We also saw some guys return to practice, and Slade Bolden, Brandon Stevens, and Jalen Armour-Davis. So, very good to see those guys return, especially for guys like, if you want to talk about fallers, I didn't really get into the injured guys. I mean, Slade Bolden is someone who didn't really get a chance to showcase his skill set while others did. So maybe you can classify him as a faller. Some of those other injured guys too. But yeah, it's good to see those guys ending up returning to practice. And then you also saw Justin Madubuike miss practice on both Saturday and Sunday. And also J.K. Dobbins. John Harbaugh clarified those absences. J.K. Dobbins, those were scheduled off days for him. They're kind of, again, the regimen working him back onto the field, back into more, less light work, more heavy works as they kind of work his way in. There will be, I guess, these scheduled off days. And then for Justin Madubuike, he's dealing with some migraines, some headache issues. John Harbaugh doesn't want to really play around with that, which I agree. Very smart. So he missed both Saturday and Sunday as they kind of try to work to figure that out. But yeah, Lamar Jackson, Rashad Bateman definitely had some plays, and we'll talk about that. Kyle Barber putting out these updates here. We had some Isaiah Likely, Kyle Hamilton battle again. It's been something throughout training camp. So Kyle Hamilton was glued to Isaiah Likely on the first rep and gets a pass breakup. The second rep was equally good, but a great pass went over him and Likely spun around for a 30-yard grab. And then Isaiah Likely actually went up against Marlon Humphrey and made a grab, but actually then Humphrey punched it incomplete. So good updates there from Kyle. He also says that Jalen Moore beat Pepe Williams for a 40-yard touchdown pass. Mark Andrews ended up almost getting a one-handed pass against Chuck Clark. Couldn't really hang on to it, though, unfortunately. And then Kyle Hamilton had his first one-on-one rep with Mark Andrews on Saturday, and Andrews ended up beating him for a touchdown. So, hey, that's how it goes when you have one of the best tight ends in the NFL going up against you. It goes that way. But, yeah, Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman had the connection. The star of Saturday's practice from Kyle was Rashad Bateman. Said he caught about everything, including multiple 20 to 30-yard completions, and had a really impressive day overall. Then Lamar Jackson ended up talking to the media after practice and talked about that deadline a little bit, the deadline that he said a couple weeks ago for the contract. Didn't really specify, but he was asked about, hey, is before the season, is it kind of fair to say that you want the contract done before the season? And he said, yeah, for sure. So hinting at the fact that, maybe that deadline is before the start of the season, which would make a lot of sense in my opinion. I think once you get into the season, it just becomes more of a distraction thing than anything else for both parties, So I think it's kind of best to just table it then and kind of revisit it after the season, in my opinion. Then Sunday's practice, you ended up having Nick Boyle coming back. He's kind of had those on again, off again type deals, but it was a slower practice according to Kyle. And Lamar Jackson wasn't as sharp as Saturday. He ended up going 8 for 15 and 11 on 11s according to Kyle. And he did have an incompletion that was a 35-yard drop by Rashad Bateman. So could have had a bit of a better day if Bateman had held on to that ball. It was apparently a really tough catch, but then Lamar Jackson had some better red zone drills. He had a Benjamin Victor touchdown, Rashad Bateman touchdown, and then also Mark Andrews, who caught a pass at the 2-yard line, and then he doesn't think Geno Stone would have gotten him down before the end zone. Then they also had some game scenarios to end the practice. And the first team ended up having a 4-and-out. The second team, 1-play interception. Third team, 1-play interception. So, yeah, not a great day for the Ravens in those end of scenario practice. You had Darrell Worley getting an interception on the second team, Jacoby McClain getting an interception on the third team. So that was not great end of the offensive practice. So, but it's offense and defense, the iron sharpens iron mentality, which again, I love about the Ravens, where the offense is not going up against like a bottom 5 defense. The defense is not going up against the bottom 5 offense on any first, second, third. These are really talented players from 1 through 90. That's what I'm looking for. And that helps them in these preseason. That's part of the reason, in my opinion, why I think the Ravens have this 21-game preseason winning streak. They go up against so many good players in practice where they're able to get on the field And then whether it's dominate, win close games, etc., some days the offense wins for the Ravens against the Ravens defense. Sometimes the Ravens defense wins against the Ravens offense. It varies day to day, but the fact that they're able to practice against so many good players, the fact that the Ravens defense go up against Lamar Jackson, the fact that the Ravens offense go up against guys like Marlon Humphrey, that is a win for the Ravens overall. And it's something that I think really does go under the radar in some aspects. But so a lot of different things going into this Ravens team right now. Again, a very impressive 23-10 win over the Titans in week 1. They suit up again against the Cardinals on Sunday. So still a bit of time there. So we'll have a lot of time to digest this Ravens win, digest some practices and practice notes as we continue on here on Locked On Ravens. So again, be sure to subscribe to this channel on YouTube, follow along on audio form. Thank you again for all your support. That's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens, though. Thank you so much for tuning in. When we get back here tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens talk. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I will see you right back here tomorrow.